The Wyoming wind carried dust and the scent of sagebrush across Samuel Crawford's ranch as he mended a section of broken fence near the main gate. The autumn of 1887 had been harsh, with early frost killing much of the grass his cattle needed, and Sam found himself working longer days just to keep his small herd fed and the ranch running. At 42, his weathered hands showed the wear of 15 years working this unforgiving land, but his grey eyes still held the determination that had carried him through the cavalry and into this solitary life. The sound of an approaching wagon made him look up from his work. A rickety old buckboard was making its way down the dusty trail toward his property, pulled by a tired-looking mare. Sam squinted against the afternoon sun, recognizing the driver as Martha Whitmore, a sharp-tongued woman from Cedar Ridge who ran the town's only boarding house. She rarely ventured out to the outlying ranches, and never with good news. Sam set down his tools and walked toward the gate, his worn boots crunching on the dry earth. As the wagon drew closer, he noticed a small figure hunched in the passenger seat, a child wrapped in a faded brown shawl despite the day's warmth. The girl kept her head down, long dark hair hiding her face, and she seemed to shrink further into herself as the wagon approached. "Afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore," Sam called out, touching the brim of his weathered hat. "What brings you all the way out here?" Martha Whitmore was a woman who had been hardened by years of running a business in a rough frontier town. Her thin lips were perpetually pressed into a disapproving line, and her sharp brown eyes missed nothing. She pulled the wagon to a stop and immediately began speaking in her clipped, businesslike tone. "Mr. Crawford, I'll get straight to the point. This here is my brother's girl, Eleanor." She gestured curtly toward the child, who still hadn't raised her head. "Poor Jacob died of fever 3 weeks back, and I've been stuck with her ever since. The child's deaf as a stone and twice as useless. Can't work, can't help around the boarding house, and I've got paying customers to tend to." Sam felt his stomach tighten at the woman's harsh words. He glanced at the girl, whose small shoulders seemed to tense even more at her aunt's description. "I'm sorry for your loss, Ma'am, but I'm not sure why you've brought her here." "Because you need help around this place and she needs a roof over her head," Martha replied sharply. "I know you've been struggling since the drought hit. This girl may be deaf, but she's got eyes and hands. She can tend chickens, gather eggs, help with simple chores. In exchange, you give her food and shelter. Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate your situation, but I don't know anything about caring for a child, especially one with special needs. This ranch is no place for—" $50, Martha interrupted, her voice taking on a calculating edge. "You give me $50, and she's your responsibility. Consider it payment for taking her off my hands and compensation for the food and clothes I've already provided." Sam stared at the woman in disbelief. "You're asking me to pay you to take in your own niece?" "Business is business, Mr. Crawford. I can't afford charity, and frankly neither can you, but this arrangement benefits us both." Martha's tone brooked no argument. "The girl won't be any trouble. She can't talk back or complain, and she's already used to hard work." For the first time, the child, Elena, lifted her head slightly, and Sam caught a glimpse of large, dark eyes filled with a sadness that seemed far too deep for someone so young. Those eyes met his for just a moment before she quickly looked away again. But in that brief connection, Sam felt something stir in his chest, a recognition of pain that matched his own. He thought of his own losses, the empty house that had once been filled with laughter, the silence that had become his constant companion. Looking at this frightened child, he saw something familiar, the hollow look of someone who had lost everything that mattered. "I don't have $50 to spare," Sam said quietly, though his practical mind was already calculating what he could manage. "40 then," Martha pressed, "and I'll throw in her few belongings. Take it or leave it, Mr. Crawford. If you won't take her, I'll have to send her to the territorial orphanage in Cheyenne, and we both know what kind of life that would be." Sam looked at Eleanor again, noting how she seemed to brace herself for rejection. Her small hands were clenched tightly in her lap, and despite Martha's claims about her deafness, something in the child's posture suggested she understood exactly what was being discussed. The wind picked up, whistling through the fence posts and carrying the lonely sound across the vast landscape. Sam had grown accustomed to solitude, but suddenly the idea of complete isolation seemed unbearable. Perhaps this child needed rescue as much as he needed purpose. $30, he said finally, "and I'll need to know about her care, what she eats, any medical needs, how to communicate with her." Martha's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile. "She eats whatever you put in front of her and sleeps wherever you tell her to. As for communication, pointing and gesturing work well enough. She's not stupid, just silent. As Martha climbed down from the wagon to complete their transaction, Sam approached Elena slowly, the way he might approach a frightened animal. The girl tensed but didn't pull away when he gently took her small bundle of belongings from the wagon bed. "Welcome to the Double C Ranch, Elena," he said softly, not knowing if she could hear him but hoping somehow she might understand that she was no longer unwanted. For the first night with Elena in the house was the longest Sam had experienced in years. After Martha Whitmore had driven away with her $30, counting the bills with obvious satisfaction, Sam had stood in his sparse kitchen, wondering what he had gotten himself into. The child had followed him silently into the house, her worn boots making no sound on the wooden floors, and had simply stood in the center of the main room, clutching her small bundle of belongings. Sam's ranch house was functional but austere, a reflection of his solitary existence. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and a simple wooden table surrounded by 2 chairs. His bedroom was down a short hallway, and there was a smaller room that had once been intended for children, though it had served as storage for the past several years. "I suppose you'll need somewhere to sleep," Sam had said, more to himself than to Elena, since he believed she couldn't hear him. He had cleared out the small room, moving boxes of old cavalry gear and ranch supplies to the barn, and had made up the narrow bed with clean sheets. Eleanor had watched his preparations with those same serious dark eyes, never moving from her spot in the main room until he gestured for her to follow him. Now, as dawn light crept through his bedroom window, Sam could hear no movement from the child's room. He dressed quietly in his work clothes, worn denim pants, a flannel shirt, and his trusty leather vest, and made his way to the kitchen to start coffee and prepare breakfast. The routine was so ingrained that he had nearly finished cooking bacon and eggs for one before remembering he now had another mouth to feed. When he knocked gently on Elena's door, there was no response. Sam waited a moment, then slowly opened the door to find the girl sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed in the same simple grey dress and worn boots she had arrived in. Her dark hair had been braided neatly, and she was staring out the small window at the ranch yard beyond. "Morning," Sam said, then remembered she supposedly couldn't hear him. He gestured toward the kitchen and mimed eating, feeling awkward and uncertain. Eleanor nodded once and followed him, her movements as quiet as they had been the night before. At the breakfast table, Sam found himself studying the child more closely. She appeared to be about 8 years old, small for her age, with delicate features that reminded him of a bird, alert and ready to take flight at the first sign of danger. Her dark hair was thick and healthy, and despite Martha's claims about her being useless, Eleanor's clothes, while worn, were clean and mended with careful stitches. Eleanor ate her breakfast methodically, never looking up from her plate, but Sam noticed she finished everything he put in front of her with the efficiency of someone who had learned not to waste food. When she was done, she sat quietly with her hands folded in her lap, waiting. "Well," Sam said aloud, forgetting again about her supposed deafness, "I guess we should figure out how this is going to work." He stood and began clearing the dishes, and to his surprise, Eleanor immediately rose to help. She moved with practiced efficiency, gathering plates and carrying them to the wash basin without being asked. As they worked side by side, Sam found himself watching Elena's reactions carefully. Something about her behavior didn't quite match Martha's description of a deaf child. Eleanor seemed to anticipate sounds, stepping aside when Sam approached with an armload of dishes, turning slightly when a floorboard creaked behind her. But whenever he spoke directly to her or made an obvious sound to test her hearing, she showed no reaction at all. After breakfast, Sam took Elena outside to show her around the ranch. The Double C wasn't large by Wyoming standards, about 200 acres of grazing land, with a modest herd of cattle, a small barn, chicken coop, and various outbuildings. Sam had worked hard to make it productive, but the recent drought and falling cattle prices had made every dollar precious. "These are the chickens," Sam explained, pointing to the coop where a dozen hens pecked at scattered grain. He mimed gathering eggs and feeding the birds, watching Elena's face for understanding. The girl nodded and approached the chickens without fear, gently shooing them aside to check the nesting boxes. She found 3 eggs, handling them with the careful touch of someone experienced with such tasks. As the morning progressed, Sam found Elena to be surprisingly helpful. She seemed to understand what needed to be done around the ranch, from feeding the chickens to helping him move supplies in the barn. Her movements were economical and purposeful, and she showed no fear of the animals or the hard work. What struck Sam most was Elena's intense observation of everything around her. Her dark eyes missed nothing: the way he handled the horses, the routine of caring for the cattle, even the patterns of wind across the grassland. She seemed to be absorbing every detail of her new environment with the focused attention of someone who had learned that survival depended on understanding the world around her. During lunch, Sam noticed Elena watching him with particular intensity as he hummed an old cavalry tune while preparing their meal. The humming was an unconscious habit, something he did when concentrating, but Elena's reaction was subtle yet unmistakable: a slight tilt of her head, a softening around her eyes that suggested the music affected her somehow. "You like music?" Sam asked, then caught himself. If she was truly deaf, the question was pointless, but something made him continue. He went to an old wooden chest in the corner of the room and pulled out a battered harmonica, a keepsake from his army days that he rarely played anymore. Elena's eyes widened as he brought the instrument to his lips and played a simple, gentle melody. Her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She leaned forward slightly, her lips parting in what might have been the beginning of a smile. For a moment, the guarded expression on her face gave way to something that looked almost like wonder. Sam stopped playing and studied Elena's face. "You can hear that, can't you?" he said softly. Immediately, Elena's expression closed off again, and she looked down at her hands. But Sam had seen enough to confirm his growing suspicion. Whatever trauma had befallen this child, whatever reason she had for remaining silent, it wasn't because she couldn't hear. That evening, as Sam prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread, he found himself humming again. This time, he watched Elena from the corner of his eye and saw her foot tapping almost imperceptibly against the chair leg, keeping time with the melody. "Elena," he said gently, setting down his spoon and turning to face her fully. "I don't know what happened to you or why you choose not to speak, but I want you to know something." He paused, searching for the right words. "This ranch can be your home for as long as you need it to be. You don't have to earn your place here, and you don't have to be anything other than yourself." Elena looked up at him then, really looked at him, and Sam saw tears gathering in her dark eyes. For a moment, he thought she might speak, might trust him with whatever burden she carried. Instead, she reached across the table and gently touched his hand, the first voluntary contact she had initiated since arriving. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. In that touch, Sam felt the beginning of something he hadn't experienced in years: the possibility of connection, of purpose, beyond mere survival. As the Wyoming wind howled outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Sam realized that perhaps they both needed this chance at healing, this opportunity to build something meaningful from the fragments of their broken lives. 3 weeks had passed since Elena's arrival at the Double C Ranch, and Sam found himself settling into a routine he hadn't expected to enjoy. Each morning, the girl would appear in the kitchen fully dressed and ready for the day's work, moving through her tasks with quiet efficiency. She had proven invaluable around the ranch. The chickens responded well to her gentle touch. She had an intuitive understanding of the horses, and she could spot a problem with the cattle from remarkable distances. But it was the small moments that surprised Sam most. The way Elena would appear at his elbow with exactly the tool he needed before he asked for it. How she seemed to anticipate the weather changes, bringing in laundry before storms he hadn't even noticed brewing. The careful way she set the table each evening, always placing his coffee cup at just the right angle. On this particular morning, a harsh October wind was rattling the windows as Sam prepared to ride out and check on the cattle in the north pasture. The weather had been unpredictable, and he was concerned about getting the herd moved to more sheltered ground before the first real snow hit. Elena stood by the kitchen window, watching the gray clouds gathering on the horizon. Her expression was troubled, and she kept glancing toward the barn where Sam was preparing to saddle his horse, Thunder. "I'll be back before supper," Sam told her as he pulled on his heavy coat. "Stay close to the house today. This weather looks like it means business." Elena nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the darkening sky. As Sam headed toward the door, she suddenly moved, reaching out and grasping his sleeve. When he turned to look at her, she was pointing emphatically toward the clouds, then toward the barn, shaking her head with obvious urgency. "You think I shouldn't go out today?" Sam asked, studying her face. Elena nodded vigorously. then pointed to herself and made a circular motion with her hands, as if indicating she wanted to come with him. Sam considered this. The girl had shown remarkable instincts about ranch life, and her small size would make it easier for both of them to ride Thunder if the weather did turn bad. Against his better judgment about taking a child into potentially dangerous conditions, something in Elena's expression convinced him she understood the situation better than he did. "All right," he said finally, "but you stay close to me. Understand?" Elena's face lit up with the closest thing to a smile Sam had seen from her. She quickly ran to fetch her coat and was back at his side before he had finished gathering his supplies. The ride to the north pasture confirmed Elena's concerns. The wind was picking up steadily, and Sam could smell snow in the air. Not just a light dusting, but the heavy, wet snow that could trap cattle in the open and cost him half his herd if he wasn't careful. Elena rode behind him on Thunder, her small arms wrapped around his waist, and he could feel her tension as they surveyed the scattered cattle. "We need to move them now," Sam muttered, more to himself than to Elena. The herd was spread across nearly 50 acres, and getting them consolidated and moved to the sheltered valley would normally require two experienced hands working together. Elena tapped his shoulder and pointed toward the eastern edge of the pasture, where a group of about 15 cattle had wandered near a rocky outcropping. She made hand signals that Sam had learned to interpret, indicating she could work that group while he handled the larger bunch in the center of the field. "Elena, no," Sam said firmly. "Cattle can be unpredictable, especially when they sense bad weather coming." "I can't risk—" But Elena had already slipped down from Thunder and was moving toward the scattered group with a confidence that stopped Sam's protests. She approached the cattle slowly, her movements calm and deliberate. To Sam's amazement, the animals responded to her immediately. She seemed to understand exactly how to position herself to guide them, using her small size to advantage as she moved among them without causing panic. Within 20 minutes, Elena had successfully gathered her group and was slowly driving them toward the central herd where Sam was working. Her natural instinct for cattle work was remarkable. She anticipated their movements, knew when to be patient and when to apply gentle pressure, and managed to keep the group together, despite the rising wind. As they worked together to move the entire herd toward the sheltered valley, Sam found himself watching Elena with growing respect. This wasn't just a traumatized child who needed his protection. She was becoming a genuine partner in the ranch work, with skills and instincts that complemented his own experience. The first snowflakes were falling by the time they got the cattle safely settled in the protected area. The storm Elena had sensed was indeed serious. Within an hour, visibility had dropped to just a few yards, and the temperature was plummeting rapidly. "We need to get back," Sam called over the wind as they mounted Thunder for the return trip. Elena nodded and wrapped her arms tightly around him as they began the careful journey home through the increasing snow. Halfway back to the ranch house, Thunder stumbled in a hidden gully, throwing both riders into a snowbank. Sam landed hard, feeling a sharp pain shoot through his left ankle as he tried to stand. Elena was on her feet immediately, unhurt but clearly frightened as she saw Sam struggling. "It's all right," Sam said through gritted teeth, testing his weight on the injured ankle. "Just twisted it, I think, but we need to keep moving or we'll freeze out here." Elena moved to his side, offering her small shoulder for support. Together they managed to get Thunder back on his feet and continued toward home. But Sam's injury slowed their progress significantly. The snow was falling harder now, and he could feel Elena shivering against him despite her heavy coat. By the time they reached the ranch house, both were exhausted and half frozen. Sam's ankle was throbbing, and Elena's lips were blue with cold. As they stumbled through the door, Elena immediately took charge, helping Sam to a chair by the fireplace and beginning to build up the fire with practiced efficiency. "Elena," Sam said as she worked, "I need you to know something. What you did today, helping with the cattle, getting us through that storm, you may have saved both our lives and half the herd." Elena paused in her fire building and looked at him with those serious dark eyes. For a moment, Sam thought he saw her lips move, as if she were about to speak. Instead, she came to where he sat and gently helped him remove his wet boots, examining his swollen ankle with careful fingers. As she worked, Sam found himself humming softly, the same cavalry tune he had played on his harmonica weeks earlier. Eleanor's hands stilled on his boot, and she looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Elena," he said gently, "I know you can hear me. I've known for weeks now. And I want you to know that whatever happened to you, whatever made you choose silence, you're safe here. You don't have to carry that burden alone anymore." Tears began to slide down Elena's cheeks, but still she didn't speak. Instead, she finished helping him with his boots, then disappeared into the kitchen. Sam could hear her moving around, preparing hot coffee and something for their supper, taking care of him the way he had been trying to take care of her. That night, as the storm raged outside and Sam rested his injured ankle, he realized that something fundamental had changed between them. They were no longer just a lonely rancher and a traumatized child sharing space out of necessity. They had become something that felt remarkably like family, not through blood or obligation, but through shared work, mutual respect, and the kind of trust that develops between people who depend on each other for survival. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt full of possibility. To Sam's ankle took nearly 2 weeks to heal properly, during which time Elena effectively ran the ranch with minimal supervision. Each morning, she would help him to the kitchen table, then head out to tend the animals and handle the daily chores that kept the Double C functioning. Sam watched from the window as she moved confidently through tasks that would challenge experienced ranch hands, her small figure barely visible against the early winter landscape. It was during this forced period of rest that Sam began to truly understand the depth of Elena's capabilities. She not only maintained their established routines, but seemed to anticipate problems before they occurred. She reinforced a weak section of the chicken coop before a windstorm hit, moved the horses to the near pasture when she sensed one of the mares was favoring her left front leg, and somehow managed to locate and repair a break in the water line that Sam hadn't even known existed. "Where did you learn all this?" Sam asked one evening as Elena helped him change the bandage on his ankle. She had produced the medical supplies from somewhere in the house he hadn't even known they existed, and her touch was gentle but competent as she wrapped the injury. Elena glanced up at him, her dark eyes holding that familiar mixture of sadness and something else, a deep intelligence that Martha Whitmore had either never recognized or chosen to ignore. For a moment, Sam thought she might answer, but instead, she simply returned to her careful ministrations. The breakthrough came on a snowy December evening, when Sam was finally able to walk without assistance. He had been restless all day, eager to get back to full activity, and had spent the afternoon checking and rechecking equipment in the barn. Elena had worked alongside him, as she always did, but Sam noticed she seemed more thoughtful than usual, as if wrestling with some internal decision. After supper, Sam settled into his chair by the fireplace with his harmonica, something that had become a comfortable evening routine. Eleanor usually sat nearby with mending or other quiet tasks, and Sam had grown accustomed to her presence as he played the simple melodies that helped him relax. Tonight, however, as Sam began to play a slow, melancholy tune he remembered from his cavalry days, Elena set down her sewing and moved closer to his chair. She stood there for several minutes just listening, her expression more open than Sam had ever seen it. When he finished the song, Elena looked directly at him and, in a voice barely above a whisper, said, "My papa used to sing that song." The harmonica nearly slipped from Sam's hands. After months of silence, Eleanor's voice was soft and clear, with just a hint of the tremor that suggested how difficult it had been for her to speak. "Eleanor," Sam said carefully, not wanting to frighten her back into silence, "can you tell me about your papa?" Eleanor sat down on the floor beside his chair, wrapping her arms around her knees. For a long moment, Sam thought she had retreated again, but then she began to speak in that same quiet voice. "Papa was a blacksmith in Colorado. He sang while he worked, said it made the horses calmer." She paused, staring into the fire. "Mama would sing with him sometimes when she was hanging laundry or cooking supper. She said music made everything better." Sam remained very still, afraid that any movement might break the fragile trust Elena was offering him. "We were coming here to Wyoming," Elena continued. "Papa heard there was work in Cedar Ridge, and Mama wanted to be closer to Aunt Martha. They were so excited about the journey, about starting fresh." Her voice caught slightly. "But the wagon wheel broke on a steep part of the trail. Papa was trying to fix it when the whole wagon just rolled." Sam felt his chest tighten as he began to understand the source of Elena's trauma. "I was picking flowers up the hill," Elena whispered. "I heard Mama calling for me to come see something, and I started to sing back to her. We always sang to each other across distances. But just as I opened my mouth to sing, the wagon started rolling toward them. Tears were streaming down Elena's face now, but she continued, I thought if I hadn't been about to sing, if I had just run down to help instead, maybe I could have warned them in time. Maybe they would still be alive. Sam carefully set down his harmonica and reached out to touch Elena's shoulder. Oh, child, he said softly. That wasn't your fault. Wagon accidents happen on mountain trails. It had nothing to do with your singing. But I was supposed to be there, Elena said, her voice breaking. I was supposed to help, and instead I was just making noise. Music isn't noise, Elena. Your parents loved your voice. You said so yourself. They wouldn't want you to give up something that brought them joy. Elena looked up at him with eyes full of pain and hope. Aunt Martha said I was cursed. She said my voice brought bad luck, and that's why nobody would want me. Sam felt a surge of anger toward Martha Whitmore, but he kept his voice gentle. Your aunt was wrong, Eleanor, completely wrong. Your voice is a gift, not a curse. And the way you've helped keep this ranch running, the way you understood about the storm and the cattle, you have talents that have nothing to do with bad luck and everything to do with being an extraordinary person. For the first time since her arrival, Elena smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed her entire face. You really think so? I know so, Sam said firmly. And I'll tell you something else. This ranch has felt more like a home in the past few months than it has in years. Not because of the work you do, though that's been invaluable, but because you're here, because we're taking care of each other. Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Can I try singing again? Just a little. Sam's heart swelled with pride and affection for this brave, wounded child who was finally ready to reclaim part of herself. I'd be honored to hear it. Eleanor took a shaky breath, then began to hum the melody Sam had been playing on his harmonica. Her voice was tentative at first, barely audible, but gradually grew stronger. It was clear and sweet, with a natural musicality that spoke of the joy she had once found in singing. As her humming gave way to soft words, a lullaby her mother had sung to her, Sam felt tears in his own eyes. The song filled the small ranch house with warmth and life, pushing back the winter cold and the loneliness that had been his companion for so long. When Elena finished, she looked at Sam with wonder in her eyes. It felt good, she said, surprise evident in her voice. It sounded beautiful, Sam replied honestly. Your parents would be so proud of you, Elena, for surviving, for being strong, and for finding your voice again. Elena moved closer to Sam's chair, and he gently pulled her up to sit on his lap, the way he might have with his own daughter, if he had been blessed with one. As she settled against him, trustingly, Sam realized that healing wasn't something that happened all at once. It was built slowly, through shared work and quiet evenings, through patience and understanding, and through the courage to let someone else help carry the load. Outside, the Wyoming wind continued to blow, but inside the ranch house, the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the possibility of songs yet to be sung, stories yet to be told, and a family bond that had formed not through blood, but through choice, compassion, and the recognition that sometimes the most broken people can help heal each other. Spring came early to Wyoming in 1888, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed to mirror the changes at the Double C Ranch. The harsh winter had tested both Sam and Elena, but it had also forged them into a true partnership. Elena's voice had returned gradually over the months, first in quiet conversations by the evening fire, then in the songs she hummed while working, and finally in the clear, joyful melodies that now filled the ranch house each morning. On a warm April day, Sam was working in the main corral when he heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Eleanor, who had been hanging laundry on the line behind the house, appeared at his side with the quick, alert movements that had become second nature to her. Together they watched as a familiar buckboard made its way up the dusty trail. Martha Whitmore was returning to the Double C. "What do you think she wants?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady, but with an underlying tension that Sam could hear clearly now that he knew her so well. "I don't know," Sam replied honestly, "but whatever it is, we'll handle it together." Eleanor nodded, unconsciously moving closer to Sam's side. The frightened, silent child who had arrived 8 months ago was gone, replaced by a confident young girl who had found her place in the world. But Sam could see that facing her aunt again brought back some of the old fears. Martha Whitmore looked exactly as she had the previous autumn, sharp-eyed, thin-lipped, and radiating the kind of disapproval that seemed to be her permanent expression. But as her wagon drew closer, Sam noticed something different in her bearing. There was less of the aggressive confidence he remembered, and more of what looked like uncertainty. "Mr. Crawford," Martha called out as she pulled her wagon to a stop. "I hope you're well." "Mrs. Whitmore," Sam replied evenly. "What brings you back to the ranch?" Martha's eyes found Elena, and Sam saw the woman's expression shift to something that might have been surprise. Elena stood straight and tall, her dark hair braided neatly, wearing a simple blue dress that Sam had ordered from the general store catalogue. But more than her appearance, there was something fundamentally different about Elena's presence, a quiet confidence that had replaced the cowering fear Martha would remember. "I've come to check on the girl," Martha said, though her voice lacked its former authority. "There have been questions in town about the arrangement we made." "What kind of questions?" Sam asked, though he kept his tone neutral. Martha climbed down from her wagon, smoothing her skirts with nervous hands. "People have been saying that I sold my own niece, that I took money for a child who should have been family. Some of the church ladies have been quite vocal about it." Elena stepped forward slightly, and when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "Hello, Aunt Martha." Martha's eyes widened in shock. "You can speak, but I was told you were deaf, that you couldn't—" "I was never deaf," Elena said calmly. "I just chose not to talk. There's a difference." Sam watched Martha's face as she processed this information, seeing confusion and something that might have been shame flicker across her features. "I don't understand," Martha said weakly. "Your father's neighbor said you hadn't spoken since the accident. He said you couldn't hear or speak." "I could hear everything," Elena replied, "including the things you said about me being cursed and worthless. I just decided it was safer to stay quiet." The blunt honesty of Elena's words seemed to hit Martha like a physical blow. She looked between Elena and Sam, clearly struggling to reconcile the confident child before her with the broken, silent girl she had brought to the ranch. "I came to discuss bringing you back to town," Martha said finally. "Mrs. Henderson at the church has offered to take you in, give you proper schooling and religious instruction. She says a child shouldn't be raised on an isolated ranch without proper feminine influence." Sam felt Elena tense beside him, but before he could speak, she stepped forward again. "This is my home," Elena said firmly. "Sam is my family now. I don't want to live in town, and I don't need Mrs. Henderson's charity." "But child," Martha protested, "you can't seriously want to stay out here in the middle of nowhere, doing ranch work like a common hired hand. You're a young lady. You should be learning proper skills, preparing for marriage, and—" "I am learning," Elena interrupted. "I can manage cattle, care for horses, tend chickens, and help run a ranch that feeds people. I can read and write and do arithmetic, and I can sing." She paused, looking directly at her aunt. "I've learned that my voice isn't a curse, it's a gift, and I've learned what it means to be part of a real family." Martha's face flushed red. "Now see here, young lady. I am your family. I took you in when your parents died, fed you, clothed you. You sold me," Elena said quietly, but with steel in her voice. "You took money from Sam and told him I was deaf and worthless. You made me believe that I was a burden nobody could want." Sam placed a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder, offering silent support. He was proud of her courage in standing up to Martha, but he could see the emotional toll the confrontation was taking. "Mrs. Whitmore," Sam said, his voice calm but firm, "Elena is happy here. She's thriving, she's healthy, and she's become an invaluable part of this ranch. More than that, she's become my daughter in every way that matters." "Your daughter?" Martha's voice rose in indignation. "You can't just claim someone else's child as your own. There are legal considerations, proper procedures." "Then let's follow them," Sam said simply. "If Elena is willing, I'd like to make the adoption official. She deserves to have her place in this family recognized by law." Elena looked up at Sam with eyes that sparkled with unshed tears of joy. "You mean it? You want to adopt me officially?" "I've wanted that for months," Sam admitted. "I just wasn't sure you'd want an old rancher for a father." Elena threw her arms around Sam's waist, hugging him tightly. "Yes," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Yes, I want that more than anything." Martha stood frozen, watching this display of genuine affection, with an expression that suggested she was finally beginning to understand what she had given up. When Elena pulled back from Sam's embrace, Martha's voice was smaller, less certain than it had been. But what about your future? What about marriage prospects, social standing? Out here you'll never meet suitable young men, never have the opportunities that town life could offer. Elena smiled, and it was a smile full of confidence and joy. Aunt Martha, I'm 9 years old. I have plenty of time to worry about those things later. Right now, I have a home where I'm wanted, work that I'm good at, and a father who loves me. That's more than most people ever get. Sam felt his chest swell with pride at Elena's maturity and wisdom. She had grown so much from the frightened, silent child who had arrived at his ranch, and he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with strength and grace. Martha stood in silence for a long moment, looking at Elena and Sam with an expression that seemed to be a mixture of regret and resignation. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I suppose I never really understood what family meant. I thought it was about obligation and duty, about doing what was expected. She paused, her eyes focusing on Eleanor. But looking at you now, seeing how you flourished, I realize I failed you in ways I never even recognized. Yes, you did, Eleanor said simply but without cruelty. But Sam didn't fail me. He showed me what it means to be wanted, to be valued for who I am instead of what I can do for someone else. Martha nodded slowly, tears beginning to form in her sharp eyes. Then I suppose I should speak to Judge Morrison about the adoption proceedings, if that's truly what you want. It is, Eleanor said firmly. As Martha prepared to leave, she turned back one final time. Eleanor, she said hesitantly, would you sing something? I'd like to hear your voice. Really? Hear it. Just once. Eleanor looked at Sam, who nodded encouragingly. Then, standing in the afternoon sunlight with the spring breeze stirring her hair, Elena began to sing. It was a simple folk song, one that Sam had taught her from his own childhood, but her voice was clear and strong and filled with the joy of someone who had reclaimed something precious that had been lost. As the last notes faded across the Wyoming landscape, Martha wiped tears from her eyes. Your parents would be so proud, she whispered, and for the first time since Elena had known her, there was genuine warmth in her aunt's voice. After Martha's wagon disappeared down the trail, Sam and Elena stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin to set behind the mountains. Do you think she'll really help with the adoption? Elena asked. I think she will, Sam replied. I think seeing you today helped her understand what she almost threw away. Eleanor slipped her hand into Sam's, a gesture that had become natural between them. I'm glad she came back, she said thoughtfully. Not because I wanted to see her, but because it helped me realize how much I've changed. How much we've both changed. Sam squeezed her hand gently. We've built something good here, haven't we? The best, Elena agreed. Then, with the mischievous smile that had become one of Sam's favorite things in the world, she added, Race you to the house? I'll start supper while you check on the horses. As they walked toward the ranch house together, Eleanor began to hum softly, not from sadness or fear, but from pure contentment. The Wyoming wind carried her voice across the grassland, a sound of joy and hope that spoke of healing completed and new beginnings embraced. Sam Crawford had thought his life was over when he lost his first family to illness and grief. Elena Morales had believed her voice was cursed when trauma stole her ability to speak. But together, they had discovered that family isn't always about blood relationships or perfect circumstances. Sometimes it's about two broken people finding each other at exactly the right moment and choosing to build something beautiful from the pieces of their separate pain. As the stars appeared in the vast Wyoming sky, the Double C Ranch was filled with the sounds of home. Elena's voice raised in song as she prepared their evening meal, Sam's gentle humming as he completed his daily tasks, and the comfortable sounds of a life built on mutual respect, unconditional love, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves a place where they belong. The silent song had found its voice, and it was more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to imagine.